We are in Genesis chapter 31. Genesis chapter 31. Let's catch us up to where we were last week. I kind of gave you a little bit of homework there to read that last part of chapter 30. But we'll summarize here because maybe you read it right after and it's been a week and you forgot. Right? So we see that Jacob has stolen the blessing, right, quote unquote, from his brother Esau through deceit. And now his brother is very angry with him, upset with him, wants to kill him, is going to wait till his father passes. And when he does, he's going to go get his brother. So that was reported back to Jacob by his mother, who had found out from someone else. And so she tells him, you need to go. You need to leave. You need to wait, let your brother kind of cool off, let him cool down, let his anger subside, and then maybe it'll be safe to come back after a while. But she sends him away to find a wife, right? So she sends him to her brother Laban's house. And so he travels, he goes to Laban's, right? And you remember there, he meets this young lady that he falls madly in love with by the name of Rachel. And he wants to marry her. And so Laban says, that's fine, you can marry her if you serve me for 7 years. And so he says, I'll gladly do that. He does it. The time flies by. He gets married and wakes up the next morning and it's not Rachel, it's Leah. And he's very surprised and probably not too happy about that. So he goes to Laban, he says, what did you just do to me? And Laban said, well, you know, around here, the older needs to get married before the younger. But he says, but I wanted Rachel, we had a deal. So Laban says, okay, fine. You can have Rachel too, but it'll be another 7 years I need you to serve. So he says, fine, I'll do it. So 14 years he serves and has both Rachel and Leah as wives. Of course, they end up having children, Leah first and the most. And then Rachel, because she can't, gives her handmaid or servant. He has children by her. Leah does the same thing, has children by her. And then finally, Rachel is able to have children. So 4 different women there, but the different children that he has through them. And then in chapter 30, as we didn't get to finish that out, but that was where Jacob kind of comes to Laban and says, look, you haven't really left me with anything. I've been here. I've worked for all this time. I've been good to you and all this. And so he says, well, whatever you think is fair, you take. And so he takes the spotted and the speckled, like goats and lambs and all that, and says, I'll take these, and has a plan. God basically prospers him, and his flocks grow in strength and in number, whereas Laban's do not. And so there's a distinction we see between the two, right? In other words, it's clear that God is blessing Jacob and not necessarily Laban, or at least not in the way that he is with Jacob. And that becomes a very clear thing, right? And so when we pick up in chapter 31, we pick up with that. But now the mood, the tone has kind of changed somewhat. Because in chapter 31, it says, now Jacob heard the words of Laban's son, saying, Jacob has taken away all that was our father's, and from what belonged to our father, he has made all this wealth. In other words, he's only wealthy because of our dad. Kind of like he's mooching off our dad, and he's basically taken from us, and he's became wealthy himself, and he's done it off of our father. And so Jacob sees the attitude there, verse 2 of Laban, and it says that it was not friendly toward him as it had been before. So before, I guess they had at least a good relationship. Now it seems as though Laban has now kind of turned or starts to turn on Jacob, right? So verse 3, the Lord said to Jacob, return to the land of your fathers and to your relatives, and I will be with you. So God is telling Jacob, it's time for you to go back. And we'll see here in a minute, it's been 20 years. So Jacob sent word and called Rachel and Leah to his flock in the field. In other words, he has a meeting with them out in the field, and he says to them, I see your father's attitude, that it is not friendly toward me as it was before, but the God of my father has been with me. You know that I have served your father with all my strength, yet your father has cheated me and changed my wages 10 times. However, God did not allow him to do me harm. If he said this, the speckled shall be your wages, and all the flock delivered speckled. And if he said this, the striped shall be your wages, then all the flock delivered striped. So God has taken away your father's livestock and given them to me. So who is Jacob crediting for his blessings, essentially? God, right? Okay. He's crediting God. Verse 9, so God has taken away your father's livestock, given them to me. Verse 10, and it came about at the time when the flock was breeding that I raised my eyes and saw in a dream, and behold, the male goats that were mating were striped, speckled, or mottled. And then the angel of the Lord said to me in the dream, Jacob, and I said, here I am. He said, now raise your eyes and see that all the male goats that are mating are striped, speckled, or mottled, for I have seen everything that Laban has been doing to you. I am the God of Bethel, where you anointed a memorial stone, where you made a vow to me. Now rise, leave this land, and return to the land of your birth. Rachel and Leah said to him, do we still have any share or inheritance in our father's house? Are we not regarded by him as foreigners? For he has sold us and has also entirely consumed our purchase price. Surely all the wealth which God has taken away from our father belongs to us and to our children. Now then do whatever God has told you. So notice the reaction here, right? Jacob calls them out in the field and he says, we need to talk. And he basically says, look, you know that I've been good to your father. You know that I've served him well. You know that I've given him my all. But you've also seen that I've been blessed. And I was blessed because of God and because of what God did to me. But notice, again, I think this is interesting. And I think it's going to come into play as we read a little bit further. But their reaction there in verses 14 and 15. I mean, notice they say, do we still have any share or inheritance in our father's house? In other words, you know, is our dad going to give us anything? Is there anything for us? Apparently, in their eyes, there wasn't. And notice verse 15. Are we not regarded by him as foreigners? For he has sold us and has also entirely consumed our purchase price. So in other words, when they looked at and thought about their relationship with their father, they said, it's not like he's given us anything. It's not like he's provided for us, or they didn't feel like they had been done right themselves by their father, right? And maybe that's just who Laban was. But they felt like, as his own daughters, they felt like there was no inheritance for them, that they were regarded by him as just simply foreigners. In other words, not a part of the family, but as strangers. He sold us. He has consumed our purchase price. And surely all the wealth which God has taken away from our father belongs to us and to our children. And so they said to their husband there, they said, do whatever God has told you. Like, we're with you. We're not against this. Okay, we'll go. So you notice there's some resentment there, isn't there? Seems to be some resentment against their father for kind of the way that he's handled them, the way that he's treated them, even what they felt like was owed to them as his daughters, as family. They feel like they haven't gotten any of that he's kind of kept that back for himself, right? So Jacob stands up, says verse 17, stood up and put his children and his wives on camels, and he drove away all his livestock and all his property which he had acquired, the livestock he possessed which he had acquired in Paddan Aram, to go to the land of Canaan to his father Isaac. Laban had gone to shear his flock, so he was kind of gone. He was out. He was away. Laban had gone to shear his flock, and Rachel stole the household idols that were her father's. And Jacob deceived Laban the Aramean by not telling him that he was fleeing. So he fled with all that he had and got up and crossed the Euphrates River and set out for the hill country of Gilead. So Jacob basically leaves and doesn't tell Laban, we're out of here. Because I guess he assumed in his mind there's going to be trouble. I'm not going to be able to leave so easily. So we're just going to get our stuff and we're just going to go. He's out shearing sheep, which was kind of something that they did. And he was probably, maybe a day or two away, journey away. So he wasn't anywhere near. So he would not know. And even if someone saw it, by the time they got to him to report it to him and he got back to the house, there was going to be 2, 3, 4 days, distance in between all of that. And so they picked a time when they could do that. But notice here what it says about Rachel and what she does there in verse 19. It says that Rachel stole the household idols that were her father's. Okay? Anybody have a different translation other than household idols in theirs? Household images or just images? Okay. All right. Anybody else got something different? Okay. Gods. Okay. So, So it's actually, in the Hebrew, it's actually the word trophim. It looks like teraphim is how it looks like it's spelled in English, but it's the word trophim. And it's a word that refers to, images or idols. We don't necessarily know if they were gods per se. We'll see some more about that just here in just a second. There's been some that have said that these perhaps were images of ancestors. In other words, ancestral images, like maybe we think about, maybe in our house we might hang up a picture of our great-grandparents or something like that, right? But some say these were images of the ancestors, and that whoever had these, they provided like a blessing or maybe even protection to that house. But Rachel takes them. She steals them, right? Okay. Now, we're going to see in a moment just kind of, the size of these, or at least what we think are the size of these, right? But she takes these things. And the question kind of is like, why did she take these household images, these household idols, right? I mean, were they gods? Were they not gods? We're not really 100% sure on that. Could they have just been the images of ancestors, right? And what did they mean to her? Like, what was her purpose in taking them? If they were gods, was she trying to follow after some god that maybe she had, known growing up? Was it the fact that she wanted blessing or protection, right? Okay, but she steals that. Now, we're going to talk about that more in just a second. Verse 22, when Laban was informed on the third day that Jacob had fled, he took his kinsman with him and pursued him a distance of 7 days' journey, and he overtook him in the hill country of Gilead. So Laban gets after it, and he catches up to him. However, God came to Laban the Aramean in a dream in the night and said to him, be careful that you do not speak to Jacob, either good or bad. So in other words, God is protecting Jacob, isn't he? He knows that Laban's coming after him. He knows that Laban's not happy, but he warns Laban, you better be careful how you treat Jacob, is basically what he says. So verse 25, Laban catches up with Jacob. Jacob had pitched his tent in the hill country, and Laban with his kinsmen camped in the hill country of Gilead. Then Laban said to Jacob, what have you done by deceiving me and carrying away my daughters like captives of the sword? Why did you flee secretly and deceive me and did not tell me, so that I might have sent you away with joy and with songs, with tambourine and with lyre? Do you really think that he was going to do that? We could have had a party when you guys were leaving. Did not allow me to kiss my grandchildren and my daughters. Now you have done foolishly. It is in my power to do you harm, but the God of your father spoke to me last night, saying, be careful not to speak either good or bad to Jacob. Now you have indeed gone away because you long greatly for your father's house, but why did you steal my gods? So here's the interesting thing, right? Now, we mentioned the household images or idols, the word trophim. Nowhere in that word trophim is the word God. It's not found in that. Okay, that's why we say the translation is probably better translated as either household images or household idols, but not necessarily household gods. But notice how Laban refers to them. He says, why did you steal my gods, my Elohim? Okay, so he refers to them as gods. So at least maybe in his mind, he kind of thought of them that way, right? So he's upset that they've been taken. Now here's the interesting part to me is that again, we don't know exactly why Rachel took these. Maybe she was just doing it to get back at her dad. Perhaps she was doing it because she felt like there was a blessing or something like that attached to it. I do find it interesting that if it was because she thought of it as being some kind of a blessing that she was taking, that Rachel would have stolen a blessing from her father's house the same way that her husband Jacob stole a blessing from his brother Esau as well. It's just kind of ironic to me if that's the reason why she did that. Yes.
There's a little note in my Bible, and it says that they had a legal significance as well, and they were effectively the right of the first inheritance. So whoever controlled them could claim as first inheritance when he passed away. So that's what this is saying, is the extra significance of taking them.
Yeah, which would lend itself to the fact that perhaps she was stealing the blessing. You think about exactly what Jacob had done to his brother. And so, yeah, that's a possibility as well, that there was, and again, the research on this has tried to look at, largely in part of kind of the ancient Near Eastern and what were some of the customs of other, cultures around them and what might have lent itself to that. But it's interesting, she steals that, right? And so Laban is not just concerned about them, but he's concerned about the fact that they took what he calls or refers to as his gods, right? And so he asked that question in verse 30, why did you steal my gods? Verse 31, then Jacob replied to Laban, because I was afraid, for I thought that you would take your daughters from me by force. The one with whom you find your gods shall not live. In the presence of our relatives, point out what is yours among my belongings and take it for yourself. Now Jacob did not know that Rachel had stolen them. So Rachel takes these household idols or images, and she doesn't tell anybody that she took them. She doesn't even tell her husband Jacob that she took them. So he doesn't know. He has no idea, right? And so he essentially says, look, I didn't take your idols. If somebody that's with me took them, you find them and they'll pay the price for that, right? But I didn't take those. So verse 33, Laban went into Jacob's tent and to Leah's tent and into the tent of the 2 slave women, but he did not find them. Then he went out of Leah's tent and entered Rachel's tent. Now Rachel had taken the household idols and put them in the camel's saddlebag, and she sat on them. So that tells us what? They must not have been very big, if she was able to kind of sit on them and to hide them, right? So Laban searched all through the tent, but did not find them. And she said to her father, may my Lord not be angry that I cannot stand in your presence because the way of women is upon me. In other words, she's basically saying it's that time of the month, right? You got to let me sit here. So he searched, but he did not find the household idols. Now here's an interesting thing, right? Because that's it. Like that's kind of where it ends as far as the household idols go. Later on we'll see where all the false, idols and images were kind of done away with or gotten rid of. But this is kind of where it ends. And it's interesting because you think, why is this a part of the story? Because it's not like there's a conclusion to it beyond this, right? Because this is kind of, boom, this is it. He looks for them, he doesn't find them. No one knows that they were taken except for Rachel. So as we might say, the only people that knew were Rachel and God, right? And Moses, as you write Genesis, okay? But that was it. So he looks, he doesn't find them. She doesn't get up. She's actually sitting on them. So she actually still has them. And you might say that she was almost at this point like, hey, this is a life or death kind of thing. Then Jacob became angry, verse 36. So now Jacob's, I was afraid, all that, but he was being accused of taking something, right? So if you're Jacob, look, fine, yes, I left and I should have said something, but I didn't, and here's why I didn't. But now you're accusing me of stealing from you, and I didn't steal from you. Look for whatever it is, and whoever took it, if someone in our party took it, then they'll pay the price for it. Well, he looks and he doesn't find it. And again, Jacob doesn't know that it's been taken, right? He doesn't know that Rachel took it. So Jacob became angry, verse 36, and he argued with Laban. And Jacob said to Laban, what is my offense? What is my sin that you have hotly pursued me? Though you have searched through all my property, you have found of all your household property, yet sit it here in front of my relatives and your relatives so that they may decide between the two of us. For these 20 years I have been with you. Your ewes and your female goats have not miscarried, nor have I eaten the rams of your flocks. I did not even bring to you that which was torn by wild animals. I took the loss myself. You demanded it of my hand, whether stolen by day or stolen by night. This is how I was. By day the heat consumed me, and the frost by night, and my sleep fled from my eyes. For these 20 years I have been in your house. I have served you 14 years for your 2 daughters, and 6 years for your flock, and you changed my wages 10 times. If the God of my father, the God of Abraham, and the fear of Isaac had not been for me, surely now you would have sent me away empty-handed. God has seen my affliction and the labor of my hands, so he rendered judgment last night. And so finally, I guess Jacob gets to the point where he's kind of had enough, And after being accused of this, he finally just lets Laban have it. Just kind of, sort of gives it back to him. It says, here's the facts, Laban. I've worked for you. I've worked hard in everything that I've done. I've never taken anything from you. I've even suffered loss. If something has, under my watch, has been eaten by wild animals, like who can control that, right? Or something like that, I've taken the loss on all of that. You changed my wages 10 different times. In other words, we agreed to this and then you change it, right? I said I want to marry Rachel. You said work for me 7 years and you can have her. I did, and you gave me Leah instead. Right? That's just one example of that. So, he's kind of laying out his case here. These 20 years I've done this, and you've been this way to me, and yet I've always been faithful to you, and now you're accusing me of stealing from you. After I've not done that for 20 years, I've been everything but that. And he says, now you found that that's not even true. And so he says, God is the one who's taking care of me. God is the one who's blessed me. God is the reason that all this has happened. And he is the one who has rendered judgment last night, which is why he told Laban, do not speak to him good or bad. In other words, you better be careful how you treat my servant. Verse 43, then Laban replied to Jacob, the daughters are my daughters, the children are my grandchildren, the flocks are my flocks, and everything that you see is mine. But what can I do this day to these daughters of mine or to their children to whom they have given birth? So now come, let's make a covenant, you and I. It shall be a witness between you and me. Then Jacob took a stone, set it up as a memorial stone. Jacob said to his relatives, gather stones. They took stones, they made a heap, and they ate there by the heap. Now Laban called it Jagar Sahadutha, I guess. I don't know. They could have just called it, place of the stone or something. But Jacob called it Galid. And they really mean the same thing, just in different languages. Laban said, this heap is a witness between you and me this day. Therefore it was named Galid and Mizpah, for he said, may the Lord keep watch between you and me when we are absent one from the other. If you mistreat my daughters, or if you take wives besides my daughters, although no one is with us, see, God is witness between you and me. So Laban also said to Jacob, behold this heap, and behold the memorial stone which I have set up between you and me. This heap is a witness, and the memorial stone is a witness, that I will not pass by this heap to you for harm. And you will not pass by this heap and this memorial stone to me for harm. The God of Abraham, the God of Nahor, the God of his father, judge between us. So Jacob swore by the fear of his father Isaac. And Jacob offered a sacrifice on the mountain, called his relatives to the meal. They ate the meal, spent the night on the mountain. Then early in the morning, Laban got up, kissed his grandchildren and his daughters, and blessed them. Then Laban departed and returned to his place. So they make this covenant basically between the two of them, that they're going to basically be at peace. After all this has happened, after this, him chasing after them and accusing them of doing all this, right, that they're going to basically have peace. In other words, he says, this is set up between where you're going to live and where I'm going to live, and you can't pass by here with the intention to harm me, and I don't pass by here with the intention to harm you. And so he says goodbye to his family and rides off into the sunset, I guess is what you want to say, right? And so, excuse me, that's what we see the last of kind of Laban there in that sense. But Jacob's story obviously is going to continue. But it's just kind of an interesting story, kind of some interesting things that take place there. And even with her, again, as we mentioned, taking the household idols and hiding them and all of that, right, and everything that happens between the two of them. But ultimately what we see is that God blessed him. And I want to remind you of what Jacob had prayed to God on his way over. Remember, 20 years earlier, Jacob is leaving. He's afraid. His brother wants to kill him. He's headed to his uncle's place. His mom's sitting there. There's a lot of unknown. There's a lot of probably fear, apprehension, all that. And basically he prays to God and says to God, look, if you will protect me, if you'll make sure that I'm okay and all this, bless me and everything, then I will serve you. You'll be my God. Well, God has done everything that he was going to do. Blessing him, taking care of him, protecting him, everything that God was going to do to look after Jacob, God has done all of that. And Jacob has recognized that. And I think that's important, right? Because it's easy for us to go through life sometimes and to have success and to be blessed. And maybe if we're not careful, we start to think about ourselves and what we've done to achieve all of that, right? Kind of reminds me of Nebuchadnezzar in the book of Daniel, when he kind of looks at everything and he says, man, look at all this that I've done. Look at this great kingdom. And it's all because of me. And then God says, well, it's time for you to be humbled a little bit. If we're not careful, God will do that. But Jacob didn't do that here. Jacob did not take the credit for this. Jacob, even the plan to broaden the herd with the spotted and the speckled and all that, that was God's doing, right? God was the one who blessed him and all of that. And so he recognizes that, right? So he's now leaving, okay? But he's got another mountain to face, doesn't he? Because he's going back home. And who's at home? Esau. And last time he left Esau wanted to kill him, okay? And it doesn't mean that fear is gone anywhere, right? So let's see what happens next. Now as Jacob went on his way, the angels of God met him. And when he saw them, Jacob said, this is God's camp. So he named the place Mahanaim. Then Jacob sent messengers ahead of himself to his brother Esau in the land of Seir, the country of Edom. He commanded them, saying, this is what you shall say to my lord Esau. Your servant Jacob says the following, I have resided with Laban and stayed until now, and I have oxen, donkeys, flocks, and male and female servants, and I have sent messengers to tell my lord, so that I may find favor in your sight. So he sends these messengers ahead of himself to kind of tell Esau all of these things, right? And he's expecting some kind of feedback, right? Is Esau like, I don't care, I'm still mad. You tell him, meet me here, outside the schoolyard, and we're gonna have it out, whatever. But notice what happens in verse 6. And the messengers returned to Jacob, saying, we came to your brother Esau, and furthermore, he is coming to meet you. Oh, and by the way, he's bringing 400 men with him. Then Jacob was greatly afraid and distressed, and he divided the people who were with him, and the flocks and the herds and the camels into two companies. For he said, if Esau comes to the one company and attacks it, then the company which is left will escape. What does Jacob think here was going to happen? Yeah, I mean, Because Esau didn't send a message and say, you tell my brother that I'm over all of that, I'm good, let's meet, let's talk, whatever, but hey, it's all good, right? That's not what he does. He doesn't send a message back. He receives the message, and he simply says, I'm coming to meet him. And he's bringing 400 men with him. And if you're Jacob, you're like, oh boy, he is not only still mad, but he's bringing 400. This is not just between me and him. This is going to be between him, 400 guys, and me, and whatever I got, right? So, I mean, there's still this fear, this apprehension, right? So what does he do? Well, he starts to come up with a plan. We're gonna divide our company, right? Because if he attacks one over here, then at least the other will escape and get away, right? So Jacob, verse 9, says, God of my father Abraham, God of my father Isaac, Lord, who said to me, return to your country and to your relatives, and I will make you prosper. I am unworthy of all the favor and of all the faithfulness which you have shown to your servant. For with only my staff I crossed this Jordan, and now I have become two companies. So what does he recognize? When I first came here 20 years ago, all I had was my staff in my hand. And now look at me. Now look at all that you blessed me with, right? My family, these servants, all the flocks and herds, everything that you've done for me. But notice he says, I'm not worthy of all this, okay? Save me, please, verse 11, from the hand of my brother, from the hand of Esau, for I fear him, that he will come and attack me and the mothers with the children. For you said, I will assuredly make you prosper and make your descendants as the sand of the sea, which is too great to be counted. In other words, God had already made this promise, and you could see inherent in that promise, God was going to take care of him, right? And so he even reiterates that promise. Verse 13, so he spent the night there, and he selected from what he had with him a gift for his brother Esau, 200 female goats, 20 male goats, 200 ewes, 20 rams, 30 milking camels and their colts, 40 cows and 10 bulls, and 20 female donkeys and 10 male donkeys. Then he placed them in the care of his servants, every flock by itself, said to his servants, pass on ahead of me and put a space between the flocks. In other words, you take these flocks and you go, and then you leave some space and then you go. So in other words, when they would meet Esau, there would just be like waves, right, of coming, this is a gift for you, this is a gift for you, this is a gift for you, right? And so he does that. In verse 17, he commanded the one in front, saying, when my brother Esau meets you and asks, saying, to whom do you belong? Where are you going? And to whom do these animals in front of you belong? Then you shall say, these belong to your servant Jacob. It is a gift sent to my lord Esau. And behold, he also is behind us. Then he commanded also the second and the third and all those who followed the flock, saying, in this way you shall speak to Esau when you find him. And you shall say, behold, your servant Jacob also is behind us. For he said, I will appease him with the gift that goes ahead of me. Then afterward I will see his face, perhaps he will accept me. So he kind of thought what maybe sometimes we think. If I give him something, then that'll, calm him down a little bit. He won't be so mad. I mean, how you stand there with all these presents and say, here you go, and him still be mad at me, right? So he's trying his best to make sure that he wants to keep his brother happy, right? Doesn't want him to be angry. So the gift passed on ahead of him while he himself spent the night in the camp. Now he got up the same night. He took his 2 wives, his 2 female slaves, and his 11 children, and crossed the shallow place of the Jabbok. And he took them and sent them across the stream, and he sent across whatever he had. So here's what he does, right? He's already sent all these gifts ahead of him. And then he takes his wives, the 2 servants, and all the kids, and he kind of sends them across. He takes them across. And then he's going to go back, and it's just going to be him. That's it. In other words, tonight it's just me. It's me and God. Whatever happens tonight, right? So he's by himself. What happens? Verse 24. Then Jacob was left alone, and a man wrestled with him until daybreak. So he doesn't get sleep, right? As far as we know. I think I wrestled with somebody last night. I felt like it when I woke up. I don't know. When the man saw that he had not prevailed against him, he touched the socket of Jacob's hip. And the socket of Jacob's hip was dislocated while he wrestled with him. And he said, let me go, for the dawn is breaking. But he said, I will not let you go unless you bless me. So he said to him, what is your name? And he said, Jacob. Then he said, your name shall no longer be Jacob, but Israel. For you have contended with God and with men, and have prevailed. And Jacob asked him and said, please tell me your name. But he said, why is it that you ask my name? And he blessed him there. So Jacob named the place Peniel, for he said, I've seen God face to face, yet my life has been spared. So it's interesting here, right? The Bible says that Jacob wrestled with someone. Right? Who is this someone that Jacob wrestled with? Okay. Well, it says at the beginning there, it calls him a man, doesn't it? It says a man wrestled with him until daybreak. So perhaps it was a man. We don't, not sure about this, but the Bible here seems to refer to him as a man. But then how does Jacob refer to him? Or what does Jacob think of him? He, at least in some respect, right, he thinks this is God, because notice what he says. He says, going down, where about? Let's see. Verse 30, Jacob named the place Peniel, for he said, I have seen God face to face, yet my life has been spared. Okay? So it's interesting because the text calls it a man, but then Jacob refers to this as being God, right? But then it's like, okay, well, is there any other clues? Well, here's the interesting part, right? Somebody read Hosea. Go to Hosea chapter 12, verses 3 and 4. Anybody want to read that? We got a microphone, but is anybody willing to read that for me? Hosea 12, 3 and 4. Hosea 12, 3 and 4.
In the womb he took his brother by the heel, and in his manhood he strove with God. He strove with the angel and prevailed. He wept and sought his favor. He met God at Bethel, and there God spoke with us.
Okay, so Hosea is talking about Jacob, because he talks about him grabbing his brother's heel, right? We've already seen that. Remember when he comes out. But then notice what he said. He struggled with what and prevailed? The angel. It was an angel. So Hosea refers to that as an angel, right? So now we got three different theories. We got, is it a man? Is it an angel? Is it God? So you ready? I don't know. I don't know. Not sure, right? It's interesting, though, to think about. I would think it wouldn't just be just a man. Like it wasn't like just some man was walking by and was like, yeah, let's go, Like he was training for the big leagues or something. And I just don't see that being it. I would think that possibly an angel, right? Maybe somebody that was representing God. But whoever that was, that struggle, at least that's what Jacob thought of him, right? But notice there's that blessing, but also this is when his name changes, right? He changes his name to Israel, for you have contended with God and with men. It says there, and prevailed. So this is where we see that name Israel come into play. Of course, we think about the children of Israel. Therefore, verse 32 says after he finished, verse 31, sun rose upon him just as he crossed over Peniel, and he was limping on his hip. Therefore, to this day, the sons of Israel do not eat the tendon of the hip, which is on the socket of the hip, because he touched the socket of Jacob's hip in the tendon on the hip. So just kind of, if you ever wondered. Just an interesting thought. It's kind of one of those passages that we read about sometimes that maybe we don't 100% know or understand exactly what that might have been, but we got three different possibilities there anyway of what possibly could have happened. But whatever it was something that was significant. It was something that obviously is there for a reason. And we think about not just that changing of the name, but what happens here as Jacob is moving forward now, right? Because remember, again, he's about to meet with his brother Esau. And what's that going to be like? What's going to happen when he finally meets his brother? Okay? So, chapter 33 says, and this is where we'll end today in chapter 33, Jacob raised his eyes and looked. Behold, Esau was coming with 400 men with him. So he divided the children among Leah and Rachel and the two slave women. He put the slave women and their children in front, Leah and her children next, Rachel and Joseph last. But he himself passed on ahead of them and bowed down to the ground 7 times until he came near to his brother. So he breaks up the family. How does he break up the family? Who's in front? The servants and their children. And who's next? Leah and the children with her. And then Rachel and him, right? So you can see that, at least in his mind, hey, if somebody's gonna be struck down first, here's how he's doing this, right? And how he's setting this forward. But it does say he himself passed on ahead of them, right? And it says he bows down to the ground 7 times until he came near to his brother. Verse 4, then Esau ran to meet him and embraced him, and fell on his neck and kissed him, and they wept. And he raised his eyes, and he saw the women and the children, and said, "Who are these with you?" And so he said, "The children whom God has graciously given your servant." Then the slave woman came forward with their children, and they bowed down. And Leah likewise came forward with her children, and they bowed down. And afterward Joseph came forward with Rachel, and they bowed down. And he said, "What do you mean by all this company which I have met?" He said, "To find favor in the sight of my Lord." But Esau said, "I have plenty, my brother. Let what you have be your own." So notice a couple of things here. Number one, notice how he continually refers to Esau and himself. How does he refer to Esau? My Lord, right? How does he refer to himself? Your servant, okay? And again, he's trying to find favor in the sight of his brother. But he explains to him, this is what all this is for. But Esau is, I don't need all that. That's yours, right? So at the end, when they finally reunite, right? It's really a good reuniting, isn't it? And it turns out well for him. Let's see, where were we? Verse 10. Now Jacob said, "No, please, if now I have found favor in your sight, then accept my gift from my hand, for I see your face as one sees the face of God, and you have received me favorably. Please accept my gift, which has been brought to you, because God has dealt graciously with me, because I have plenty." So he urged him, and he accepted it. So in other words, he kind of kept on, and so finally he accepted it. Esau said, "Let's journey on and go, and I will go ahead of you." But he said, "My Lord knows that the children are frail, and the flocks and herds that are nursing are a matter of concern to me. And if they are driven hard just one day, all the flocks will die. Please let my Lord pass on ahead of his servant, and I will proceed at my leisure, at the pace of the cattle that are ahead of me, at the pace of the children, until I come to my Lord at Seir." So in other words, he's saying, look, we've been traveling a long time. Everybody's worn out. I don't want to push this. Let me just kind of take my time and make sure that everybody's going to be okay. And so, there's sort of that, okay, that's fine. That'll work. And so verse 15, Esau said, "Please let me leave with you some of the people who are with me." But he said, "What need is there? Let me find favor in the sight of my Lord." So Esau returned that day on his way to Seir. But Jacob journeyed to Succoth and built for himself a house and made booths for his livestock. Therefore, the place is named Succoth. Now Jacob came safely to the city of Shechem, which is in the land of Canaan, which he came from Paddan Aram, camped before the city, and he bought the plot of land where he had pitched his tent from the hand of the sons of Hamor, Shechem's father, for 100 pieces of money. Then he erected there an altar and called it El Elohe Israel. So we kind of see how this ends up, and it's pretty remarkable here, because you think about, because it's not like Esau was the most mature person, I guess you would say, right? I mean, what's our picture of Esau kind of when they're growing up, right? I mean, he sells his birthright for a pot of stew. So what does that kind of tell you about Esau and who he is? Maybe he's a little bit impulsive, right? Maybe there's a little bit of drama there, whatever the case may be, right there. I mean, there's issues there. He's not, So you can see why Jacob may have been a little bit alarmed at all of this, right? And kind of why he felt the way that he felt. So we kind of see some of this and maybe sort of how he felt there. And so he wanted to kill his brother, right? Last time he saw him, that's what he wanted to do. But notice the reunion here, and how Esau is now acting and towards his brother and treating his brother. It's really a 180. And I think we think about, I'm sure there's part of that Esau grew up, right? I mean, 20 years has passed, and so there's a lot of growing up one person does, right? Maybe he had a lot of time for, introspect and all that kind of stuff. And so I'm sure there was like a maturing and a growing up. But I also think we can't discount God, right? And what God has done in all of this. And what this has meant as far as God promising to protect Jacob, right? And take care of him. What do you think about that? Anybody got any comments or thoughts on this? Somebody say something. I'm looking for something in my notes. I need somebody to talk for a minute. Somebody raise your hand and say something. Oh, somebody's got a good comment here. All right, let's go.
I think you're right about that, Brian. Time, for each one of them, not just Jacob, but Esau, to look at their lives, what they had done, and where they were headed.
Yeah.
Especially when you make the promise, he said that Jacob told God if he would bless and protect him, he would serve him. And we're not sure, God did not reveal anything what Esau had done, but I'm sure, his family, influenced him to serve God as well.
Yeah. Okay. Anybody else? Almost.
Brian,
Yes.
how far is like Sir from Succoth? Like how far Esau went back, and then how far was Jacob staying away from his brother? I was trying to find it on my map, but I can't at the moment.
I don't know. I have to look that one up. I don't have that in my notes. I'll have to try to look that one up. Yeah, man, where is that at? I was just looking at it last night. I'll find it as soon as the second bell. I got 5 minutes, don't I? Who else got something to say? I know it's in here. Man, it was so good too. I don't know. I promise it's in here. Go ahead. You need a microphone? Where she got a microphone?
You can do wrong and how deceitful, because that's how he did his brother.
Right.
He knew what he was doing, and he ended up in life, he ended up having an uncle do that to him, and he thought surely there was going to be retribution when he came to his brother and he saw the beauty of forgiveness. He saw the beauty of someone who just loved him and didn't want to destroy him. I mean, I walked away feeling really good after I read that. And, it just makes you kind of think what you have in your head because of how you are doesn't mean somebody else is going to be like that.
Yeah, I like the fact that you have a microphone, man, that just sit there and hold it for you. I like that. No, yeah, and I think, again, goes back to, to what God can do in protecting, right? I think it definitely speaks to that. Okay, I found it. Sorry. Okay, this was something that someone had written. I think it's interesting here, right? Because I'd never thought about this before I read it. And I'll read this, and then I think we'll come over here. Okay, so think about this. This is somebody, and they sort of, I guess you call this a psychological reading into Jacob and who he is. And this is what they said. From a young age, Jacob wants more than anything to be Esau. It's an interesting thought, right? And think about this. This is what he says. Jacob is born grasping Esau's heel. Jacob buys Esau's birthright. Jacob dresses in Esau's clothes. Remember when he took the blessing, right? Jacob takes Esau's blessing. Jacob says to his father, I am Esau, your firstborn. And so it's just kind of an interesting thought. I just want to put it out there. Just, that someone looks at this and says, it seems like maybe Jacob even kind of always looked up to his older brother. And that could very well be true, right? Even though all that had happened to him. I think, if nothing else, we see that the relationship between them two is important. And I think it's as we move forward, and we'll look at this, I think, next week, is when their dad dies and they're able to come together as brothers and be there for the death of their father and do all that too, after everything that's happened in the past, right? John,
To answer Teresa's question, Succoth is actually a town that was established by Jacob. It becomes later a town, where Seir is an area. It's kind of a mountain range along the side. So it's about 100 miles between the two. Succoth being in the north between the Dead Sea and the Red Sea, the Sea of Galilee, and Seir is kind of south and east of the Dead Sea, a mountain range.
Yeah. Okay.
So it could have been a long ways. It could have been short. So it depends on where in that area.
Right, where in the area you are.
Right.
It's kind of like, if you're in Florida, how long does it take to get from Florida to Georgia? Well, if you're in Hilliard, Florida, right, and you're just trying to get across the state line, but if you're in, Key West or something, yeah, right. So, yeah, okay. So that answers but doesn't answer your question, I guess. Okay, very good. Yeah, I just kind of thought it was an interesting thought, how someone kind of viewed Jacob and his relationship with his brother Esau. But again, I think above all, we see that God has protected Jacob just like he said he was always going to do. And remember, again, going back to that, when Jacob was first traveling to Laban's house, right, he basically prays to God and says, look, God, if you'll bless me and if you'll protect me from the hand of my brother and take care of me, I will serve you. You'll be my God. And that's exactly what God does. And, of course, that's what Jacob does. He serves God for his entire life. Thank you.